Welcome to another episode of Policy and Me. My name is Samantha Bennett. Did you know that our trees provide more than just shade? Did you know that they purify the atmosphere so that we can breathe clean air? Do you know that our trees protect us, protect our shorelines so that we are not flooded out? Today, we will have with us Mrs. Kadian Cruickshank, Senior Director of Legal Services. But before we get into it, we need to hear from you. Can you name at least one forest in Jamaica?
Cut the cameras. Don't know if we don't. Blue Mountain one?
Alright, it's where I come from. I come from up here on the Blue Mountain side. So you have pine forest where a lot of pine tree, and you have a lot of guango tree and cedar tree. Yeah, you have a lot of cedar tree.
The Coptic country.
Why do you think forests are important?
Forests are a part of the water cycle, and also it's a part of, I think, the CO2 and oxygen cycle. So it helps in the balance of that. Also is a part of helping keeping the environment good. Also a habitat for the indigenous species in Jamaica.
Because it keep the environment of the country fresh. Without the tree, then we now can enable to breed the right ear or one breed. You understand? So I feel like the more tree, the better it is for we.
Forests are important not only because they provide ecological support to the environment and biodiversity. They also helps with the consumption of carbon dioxide when it comes on to our emissions, because that's a very big thing now. Forest provides a natural habitat, and they also host a lot of different resources, and there can also be great tourism promoters within the country.
Have you heard about any laws or policies that protect Jamaica's forest?
No. Yeah, we hear about a lot of laws pertaining to the chopping down the tree them in the forest, or light fire in the forest, because they don't really want to fire light in that forest.
Yes, I know that there has the Pedro banks where we were protecting those keys. I know that the government plan to expand the forestry reserve place where they have more, expand the amount of forage that they're covering are protected. And I know specifically for Negril we have the Great Maras projects that we protecting that, and that's very good.
What do you think the government is doing to protect our forests?
Are they really doing something to protect the forest?
In could do more. Because we don't have no real body structure set up. We don't have no institution with no forest man set up where, you like how you can go out there at a place, them and you see people tour the hills of them a forest. You don't have enough of that in Jamaica.
They're doing everything they can by providing legislation, enacting the legislation, enforcing the legislation rather. There's much more to be done, but we are on the right path when it comes on to saving our environment.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Cruickshank, for being here with us. But before we get into our questions, I wanted to ask, what is the importance of the forest and what role does it play in our environment?
So forests are very important to human existence. They provide a source of food, water, shelter. All our basic needs can be met from the forest.
Wow. It's really good to know that the trees that we see every day play such an important role for us. And so, to get into it, I'm going to go ahead and go into my policy part and dig up a question for Mrs. Cruickshank. All right. So my first question for you is, what is the forestry's policy and why and when was it created?
Okay, so the forest policy for Jamaica was created in 2017, and it was created with a vision of seeing Jamaica's forests and ecosystems and biodiversity restored by the year 2062. So when you talk about a policy, we're talking about a deliberate system of guidelines put in place to achieve a particular objective. And so the forest policy for Jamaica are those guidelines instituted by the government of Jamaica with a view to ensuring that the nation's forests are adequately protected particularly those vulnerable forest types such as broadleaf forests and mangrove forests. And when we talk about broadleaf forests, just a little bit of information, we're talking about what Christopher Columbus came here and saw. So those forests that are undisturbed, untouched, very lush. Perfect, you've got it.
Wow, that's quite interesting though. So I mean, this is kind of off topic, but does that include Blue Mountain areas in those areas out of curiosity?
Definitely. Those are some of the areas that are actually under our protection. Blue Mountain Forest Reserve is one of them. The Cockpit Country Forest Reserve is another, and that's a controversial topic, so I'll just leave that one right there.
No problem.
And we also have the Hellshire Hills Forest Reserve, which a lot of persons don't know it's an actual forest reserve, but everybody is familiar with Hellshire Beach.
Well, that's quite interesting. I didn't know that. But my next question for you is, what are the key goals of this policy?
All right, so the key goals of the forest policy for Jamaica align with the Forestry Department's mandate, which is conservation, protection, and reforestation, in a nutshell. So the goals surround the governance structure, making sure that it is appropriately improved so that the forests are adequately protected, all with the view of achieving its no net loss policy. And also to facilitate improved decision making across sectors. For those sectors that intersect with forestry, they will know where we stand in terms of how we want to protect our forests, and then they can therefore align their goals and objectives in accordance with that for the betterment of Jamaica. So the second goal is to see the increase of the conservation and protection afforded to our forests and ecosystems, as well as the third goal is the incorporation of socio-economic considerations into this forest conservation and protection practice. So we want to get people involved. We want to foster a culture of inclusiveness, because we know that there are lots of forest-dependent communities, and we want to make sure that those persons are kept as part of the conversation so that everybody feels this project or this policy as being something that each of us will own as our own.
So who should really know about this policy?
Oh boy, all of us. Every single solitary Jamaican should know about the forest policy because it affects us all. There are some groups, however, who it affects more than others, and those would be those persons whose livelihood depend on it.
True, that's true.
Those government entities who have a role to play in the development of legislation and other goals and other policies as it relates to forest sector. Children, I'm going to say, definitely, they are the future. So we need to make sure that we can get this buy-in from everybody.
Exactly.
And so kids at a tender age need to be apprised of the forest policy. Businesses, tourists who want to come here, as you mentioned, for our lush landscape, they are the ones who really should know about the policy and what it offers.
So what are some of the biggest threats to Jamaica's forestry?
So there are a number of threats which negatively impact our forests. Among them being illegal activity. We have instances of illegal logging, we have instances of animal pasturing, we have instances of agricultural squatting, all of this taking place within our forested lands. There are other issues such as natural disasters, hurricanes.
Yes, definitely.
We had Hurricane Beryl the other day.
Oh my.
We also have pests and diseases which sometimes impact our forests, and also unsustainable mining and quarrying practices is also a threat.
Okay, so when you say pests and diseases, is that why they tell you to declare what you're carrying back if you're like carrying foods on the planes and stuff like that? That's the reason?
Definitely, that's part of the reason, because there are a lot of things that can come into our island that didn't exist here before, but which can also create a negative impact on our entire society, not just the forest, but broader than that. Even people.
Okay. It makes sense now.
Definitely.
So what issues does this policy address?
So the forest policy for Jamaica seeks to address several issues to include the climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. It also aims to strengthen the protection of our forest resources and also improve the transparency and public education and awareness.
And I think the Forestry Department is doing a fairly good job with that, because I can remember when there was a point where I remember it was just being broadcasted that you could come and get plants, you could do this. There was just so much information being flooded on the various television, social media platforms all over.
Yes.
So I think you guys are doing a fairly good job. So which areas in Jamaica are protected under this policy? And I know we probably asked this question a bit earlier, but I want you to go in more details, like, if you can.
All right, so the forest policy per se doesn't protect the areas. What protects the areas is the Forest Act of Jamaica. But the policy does speak broadly to the protection and how these protected areas are managed and are conserved and otherwise protected. Now, the Forest Act provides for the declaration of certain parcels of land as either forest reserves or forest management areas to increase the protection afforded to them. And the distinction being that forest reserves, much like the closed broadleaf forests, are the more pristine of those forests, where we allow limited activity in terms of just maybe allowing research activities and other very controlled with minimal interruption, to allow for that sort of biodiversity to be conserved. Whereas the forest management areas now are those parks and other recreational activities, areas that persons who may want to go ahead and participate in, forest type outdoor activities.
Yes, be one in nature.
Precisely.
So that means I just can't just go and chop down the place and that everything is just protected.
Definitely not.
And that's what I like to hear now, because Jamaica is the land of wood and water. So
Amen.
Definitely love to hear that. So guys, definitely love the conversation. But that's all the time we have for today. So join me in our next episode, part 2, where we discuss Jamaica's forestry policy.